Coming up on the NESN Bruins podcast, we figure out what's been going wrong for the Bruins, who all of a sudden are in a season-long 4-game losing streak. We also take a look at some of the lineup decisions and figure out when this team is going to get back on track. Play the music. Hey there. Welcome. NESN Bruins podcast. I'm NESN.com's Mike Cole, joined as always by NESN.com's Logan Mullen. Logan, how are you?
Good, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine. Doing better than the Bruins are right now. Bruins.
Not hard to do.
It was bound to happen, and we have finally arrived. The Bruins in the midst of a 4-game losing streak, 3 of those games in regulation. It also includes the Bruins' first regulation home loss. The sky is falling for the local hockey team. It's not good right now.
No, it's not.
I'm actually kidding. It is not good, but I don't think
losing every game isn't sustainable.
Yeah,
but
that is
not the end of the world. They
would probably rather be winning than losing. But I think that
probably just wrap it up there.
Yeah, and that's it. We'll see you again next week. I think everybody who is at least somewhat realistic knew that this was bound to happen at some point. Maybe not to this extent. But it is a 82-game season over the course of 6-7 months. Ebbs and flows are abound. I don't know what else to say. They have not looked particularly good throughout this stretch, but I will say that they looked a little bit better on Wednesday night against Washington. Bruce Cassidy sounded encouraged, so I would not be surprised if they're ready to turn the corner. That being said, this is not ideal.
Well, there's not much shame in losing to the Capitals or the Avalanche.
True.
It's a little different with the Blackhawks and most certainly the Senators. But, I mean, with regards to the ebbs and flows, this streak started right after an 8-game winning streak concluded,
yes.
So there's that. But a little bit of a spin zone here, okay? I know this might make me sound like a bit of a hack, but maybe this is a good thing in some respects because particularly in October and for stretches in November, how many times did they win games quite ugly?
Yeah.
And it came after either a massive third period comeback, came after just 40, 50, sometimes almost 60 minutes of just objectively bad hockey, but they found ways to overcome it. That's a great skill to have, whatever, not trying to minimize that. But maybe it'll be a little bit of a wake-up call, shake their tree a bit, that it's like, oh, you can't just cruise past. The Capitals game isn't a good example, but you can't just cruise past the Avalanche.
Yep.
Teams like that, they kind of learned that, playing a garbage first period probably isn't going to lend itself to great results against actually good teams.
I'm just looking it up right now. Let's see. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I'm not mistaken, they were 7-0 in non. It's not including 7-0 and whatever in 1-goal games before this losing streak. So, and that was something that Bruce Cassidy actually touched on. I think it was Wednesday night. I was listening to some of the audio earlier. Either Wednesday night or Tuesday afternoon, or morning, whatever it was, saying this is just one of those things that it was bound to come back and turn around on us, where they were being, they were relatively fortunate earlier in the season where it was, he mentioned, we got that extra save, or we scored that power play goal, or, we did this, we did that. And he was quick to mention, take Wednesday night, for example, not to take anything away from Halak and, going up against Washington, and all of those goals were legit. But, earlier in the season, he probably would have made some sort of miraculous save on one of those, and they find a way to score that. They don't go 0 for 5 on the power play. They don't have a power play goal taken away because of an offside review, et cetera, et cetera. So, 82 games is not a huge sample size, but it's a hell of a lot bigger than 25, and these things happen over the course of a season, which is not the most hot take of analysis, but it's just kind of, there are certain points in the season where you just have to look back and be like, this is kind of what happens over the course of a professional hockey season.
Well, I'm looking at some of those situational stats. So this year, they are 4-5-3 when trailing after 2.
Yeah.
So they've
Which is insane.
Yeah, they've still won 4 games when trailing after 2 periods.
I mean, they've gotten what was it, 4, 5, and 3?
4, 5, and 3.
So they've gotten points in 7 of 12 games in which they've trailed after 2 periods.
Yeah,
It's
and they are 5-1-1 when tied after 2.
Yeah, that's not sustainable.
Right, so you can't really bank
You're
on
just
that.
I mean, that's 20 minutes of luck basically, where it's just how randomness.
Yeah. And they're 7-2-3 when their opponent scores first, and they are 5-2 in 1-goal games.
Sure. So that's something to keep in mind as you're assessing this right now.
Well, right, and it sounds they've still been successful, right? They're the second best from a points perspective. They're the second best team in the NHL. But at the same time, it's kind of tough not to say that the writing wasn't at least on the wall a little bit, because
and we touched on that at times too.
We did. Well, when we were spinning our wheels in October and the beginning of November, being like, "What the hell do we talk about?" Because they're just dump trucking teams, or so it seemed at times. You also saw kind of those little cracks, those little issues. I was like, well, what happens when the goaltending comes back down to earth? What happens when they don't mount these miraculous
when you're not
comebacks?
scoring seemingly three power play goals a night,
right?
Or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's something too. Is just this was all about it. It's no surprise they're losing games, because I crunched some of the numbers. The power play on this losing streak, 1 for 17. Going into for however many games it was before this losing streak. They had the second best power play in the league, 29.4%. 1 for 17 is considerably lower than 29%, if I'm not mistaken. They had an 11.4 shooting percentage up and through December 5th. Since then, 6.1 shooting percentage. That's 28th in the league. So that 11.4 is astronomical. That's not going to stick, especially for a team that doesn't have generational talent up and down the lineup like the Bruins. The Bruins are not that. Let's see what else. They're still getting shots. They're still taking shots, but 46 shots missed the net or went wide. Went over the net during this losing streak. Only Tampa Bay has had more, so something has to give on Thursday night. And they haven't hit a post or a crossbar. So if they're missing, they're missing by a wide margin. Yeah. So it's not surprising. This was bound to happen, and it is what it is. And I tend to agree that it probably is. These are it's 2 points. It probably is a good thing in the long run, because they're gonna have to try to figure out a way to get out of this. And with a veteran team like that, I think there's just certain reminders that you need here and there. And you listen to, or you see the highlights out of the practice Tuesday in Washington, where they had a line brawl at the end of practice, where they're just messing around and Tuukka's breaking sticks, and it seemed pretty lighthearted. And Cassidy said, after that practice, he said something along the lines of, we felt the need to get back to enjoying the game, by also taking care of business and trying to find the balance between those two things. And I think that's one of the more interesting things about the job that a coach does at this level, where it's how do you balance the ups and downs and just the grind of the season. I think they're kind of working their way through that, and I think every team is probably unique, and you have to find which buttons to push, and he's still figuring that out. I even thought it was interesting. They're talking about what they're grateful for and stuff. So it's been part of the entire theme of this 2019-2020 team, where there's certain buttons that he's pushing, whether it's sports psychology and things like that. So I think those are the types of things that you draw on as the season goes on, because there's going to be another. They'll get out of this, but there's going to be another swoon in February. You can set your watch to it. It's going to happen again. That's just the nature of the beast, especially for a team that was just spent 2 months realizing how good it still is. Right. And it's probably kind of hard to get up for Chicago on a Thursday night at home when that you could fast forward to April and you're going to be one of the cup contenders.
Right. Well, and I think also they might say that they don't pay attention to the standings all that much. I feel to a degree they probably do, because it is also insane. I think they're 10 points up right now on Buffalo and Florida, even having dropped their last 4 games. And I think they know that there's no reason to really hit the panic button right now. Things will sort themselves out. Mm-hmm. I'm getting pissy about it or whatever isn't really going to fix anything, because they're not in a position where they need to start actually getting legitimately mad about results. So I think they're in a position where they can kind of be patient and be like, well, what do we need to do to kind of get out of these ruts? Is it mixing up things in practice a little bit and realizing we still can have fun or whatever it is? But I don't, not in a bad way, but I don't get the sense that there's a ton of urgency to necessarily fix things because they know what they are. There's obviously urgency to fix issues like the fact that they've been a disaster in the first period. But otherwise, like, whatever, they're fine.
Yep. Seems difficult to have to do that every night in a sport like that where if you're not with it 100%, you're probably going to get run out of the building. And they've been good enough where even when they, on nights they do get run out of the building, they're still in the game later on. So, not a whole lot there. It is what it is at this point. And they'll figure it out. I think we both agree. This is going to go up Thursday night, and by the time people listen to us, they could have routed the Lightning, and actually what I think is a real interesting game for both teams because the Lightning needs something to turn themselves around too. So I don't want to talk too much about a game that's going to happen basically in this weird time vacuum between now and then. So let's move on.
All right.
You want to talk about Brett Richie again? So.
Yeah. So I've started to gather that Brett Richie is this year's what's the terminology that you want to give it? The most maligned figure on the Bruins, most likely. I mean, last year it's probably Joakim Nordstrom. Years before that, it's been Backus, it's been Jimmy Hayes, it's been Matt Bolesky. Take your pick. Look, I don't understand why Brett Richie's on the second line. I don't feel that there's an obligation to play him. I've felt like David Backus, for the most part, has been fine enough to where you could probably justify putting him on the second line and not disrupting what they have in that Bjork, Coyle, Heinen third line and their first and fourth units. But let's kind of make clear here what Brett Richie's role is. He was a guy that they essentially took a flyer on, who had a 16-goal season a few years ago. They had effectively no cap space with which to work with this past offseason because when they signed him, they had no clue what the deal with McAvoy and Carlo was going to be. And if he doesn't work out, you put him on waivers, and that's it. Similarly to what they did with Jamel Smith last year after trading for him. There's no sense in getting so worked up about Brett Richie because I think we can all agree that the Stanley Cup's probably not going to be won or lost based on what Brett Richie does, right? Like, good or bad. So he's not working out. Fine, you deal with it now. I don't get why they aren't playing Backus over him, but there's no sense in just shredding Brett Richie. Like, it's a tire fire logging onto Twitter during games, and it's just like everyone's acting like the cause of these issues is the fact that they're playing Brett Richie. It's whatever. He is who he is.
I feel like you just changed your opinion, or you were evolving there, where it was you were very anti-Brett Ritchie. And
well, I don't have.
Just said, screw it, we're all going to die someday.
I don't have it. Well, we are all going to die.
So why are we talking about
I don't have an axe to grind with him. That's things like, okay, fine. He gives them essentially nothing. There's really no reason why you should be playing on the second line. But at the same time, why is it worth getting worked up over?
Yeah, it's true. I think actually right now, too, we might be in this time, space, wherever we are. I don't mean that. That sounded much more existential. I was just trying to think of the word. We're in a time frame where Cassidy might be trying to figure out what he has with him. And Cassidy might be giving him every last chance to do something with it.
Yeah.
And if nothing comes of it, maybe there'll be a change down the road. But, well, actually, I just pulled this up too. Cassidy mentioned it Wednesday before the Capitals game. He literally said we need to see him more. I think that's both physically and theoretically. I think they're challenging him as well. They wanted a better start out of him. This is out of the Globe. DuPont wrote about it, and Cassidy says part of it's on me to stay patient with him, and part of it's on him. So it's exactly what it is, I think. They're just trying to figure out what they have here, and they're working through some things. And again, that's what happens when you don't have a legitimate second line winger. There's that's going to be a revolving door until they find what works. And I think for better or worse, they feel okay, putting that on Krejci, for lack of a better term, and trying to figure it out.
They've sandbagged him for like 6 years already.
Yeah, I was being far more diplomatic than you were, but yeah, that's true. And
Call it what it is.
yeah, I guess that's that's what I imagine is where they're at with him, is just trying to figure it out, give it as many chances as they can now in December, before the rubber meets the road. You get some injuries here and there, whether it's on the big club or down in Providence to wingers and things like that. You're not at 100%, so you're still kind of mixing and matching. And February will be here before you know it. So you got to figure out when the deadline is going to be approaching. So at a certain point, I imagine that will change, and they'll start rotating in maybe even some of the younger guys, not necessarily as showcasing, but just kind of figuring it out. So I think this is all part of that process.
Yeah,
and it's just you kind of have to see the forest through the trees or whatever.
Yeah, and Richie's kind of weird too because he's also not a prospect. So it's not like they feel some sort of obligation where it's like
it's not a huge financial investment either.
Right. So that's kind of been my confusion is like, well, why do they feel so compelled to keep giving Richie looks? And my guess is because they probably don't want to play Par Lindholm in a role other than a center. And in order to do that, then you're messing with all these other lines. So it's like, well, you don't want to start destroying your forward lines that are working just so you can get Par Lindholm in instead of Richie. But yeah, I've just never understood the sheer disdain people have for him. Like, whatever, he is what he is. He's not really going to impact the Bruins' chances at success all that much.
No.
It's whatever.
I'm
Good?
Jeez, yeah, I'm going to mention that next time.
Getting choked up talking about Brett Richie.
Next time Brett Richie comes up, what is going on?
Jeez.
I'm dying. All right. You also want to talk about the sixth defenseman again, so.
Well,
lay it on
me. For Christ's sake, we had 2 months of guessing what was going to happen, and then stuff finally happened, and then you're being, apathetic about discussing it. I personally was shocked that Steven Camphor was sent down. Because Steven Camphor is whatever, he gets to play now.
It's a Steven Camphor role.
It is, but
taking advantage of him.
I thought the Steven Camphor role was being the seventh defenseman. Like, what benefit are you doing however old he is, 23-year-old Connor Clifton by just sitting him? Because it looks like they're more than willing to lean on John Moore, except in back-to-backs.
Clifton played Wednesday. I don't know.
Yeah,
he's playing. You can't. You're past the point of no return with Clifton, where you can't send him down. So you have to. It's either you play him every night, or you kind of go with the flow.
They can't possibly trust him. Like I've decided that's my take. Like Connor Clifton, what did he play last night? Like 11 minutes or something like that. John Moore's first game back, they played him 17-something minutes. There's so much more trust in him. In Moore than there is Clifton. So they probably are just trying to keep him fresh, maybe showcase him. I get that he's cheap, and in a pinch, you could have far worse options as your seventh defenseman, but he's still young enough to where there's probably growth in his game. And if you're going to play him, a few times a month, then you might as well take your chances putting him on waivers. Who knows? But I don't know.
I think he's shown enough, though, over the last year or two, or whatever, where I don't think that you want to take that risk.
I guess so. I guess it depends on what they think his ceiling is, right?
Like, if they obviously think it's higher than you do.
They must. But if they think it's what Camphor is, then I can understand why they're like, you know what, we're just going to have this guy be our seventh defenseman. But if they think he could actually be, if they actually thought he could be an NHL regular, like a third pairing regular, it's him and Grzelcyk, that's who we're rolling with, he'd be playing right now. And they'd be scratching John Moore like they did last year. But they're just, I don't know if it's from the front office or from, some of it at least has to be Cassidy, just judging by the ice time. But it doesn't seem like there's a ton of trust in him.
No. You get turned.
And I don't blame him. And I've said this before, that the Clifton thing, the whole Cliffy hockey thing, I think it's just an excuse to say he plays recklessly sometimes.
Yeah.
A lot of times. And he leads himself astray.
Yep. You got absolutely undressed by TJ Oshie on Wednesday night. That happens, but geez Louise. I don't have a whole lot to add to that because I think, we're talking about 11 minutes of ice time here, but I wonder what the time frame is for all of these decisions, or if it's just something where they're like, let's kind of mess with it here and there, and there's going to be an injury at some point, and then that'll kind of make our decision for us. But I wonder if it gets to a certain point. We thought it was going to be the Clifton, the waivers thing, like that was going to be the deadline. That clearly isn't it. I wonder if there's a point where they're like 6 weeks from now and everybody's still healthy. When is decision time? If assuming they don't have to make a roster move.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I do feel they mismanaged the Clifton thing, but something must be up with
that
Kevin
being
Miller.
said, though, yeah, true. That's probably it. But if you can get, I get your point about the Camphor thing, but it's always good to have depth at that position. So
right, I don't disagree.
So it's like you shouldn't be going. That's the other thing too. Is as soon as you make a move, whether if it was putting Clifton on waivers and he got claimed, and you lose him, and all of a sudden, Camphor gets hurt, or or Moore gets hurt again. I mean, that's the other thing too. Moore might not be. Who knows how likely he is to get re-injured or something like that. So they might want the added insurance.
Well, and they're not really in a position where they can gamble with their right shot guys, right?
Yeah,
like their extra right shots right now are Clifton and Camphor, and they're playing two lefties on the third pairing. But after that, essentially none of their prospects, at least any that would be close to NHL ready, are right shots.
Yeah.
Lozon's lefty, Zaboral's a lefty.
You're right.
Vakanainen's a lefty.
It might say a lot more about Kevin Miller than we're giving
It must.
credit for.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what's happening with him, but he must be some sort of a, I don't want to say deal breaker in this situation, but he must factor into things in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean, one way or another, he's got to get back before you can really start making wholesale decisions. Because whether it's he goes on the trade block or he, drives back into the lineup, the guy's coming back from a twice broken kneecap, so it's you got to see it before you can really make a decision. So
yeah.
Anything else at all that you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. Right? It's been whatever, pretty typical. Not even a typical week, but nothing too newsworthy. So unless you want to sit here and try and manufacture crap.
Well, that's fun. That always, I've seen it. It works out well.
I mean, we can do it.
No, we're not going to manufacture things. The road trip continues. Tampa Wednesday, Florida. Today's Thursday.
Today's Thursday.
Well, we're usually in here on Wednesday, so I get confused there.
That's true.
So Tampa Thursday, Florida Saturday, and then the Kings next Tuesday.
Well, that'll be a good one to get back on track with after playing the absolute wagon that is the Florida Panthers.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's. I think we're good.
Yeah,
I think we're done
bounce.
here. Let's figure out something a little more engaging next week. Maybe we'll have to get a guest or something as we head into the Christmas break.
Yeah.
So be here before you know it. Bruins are not good right now. They'll be good eventually again. Such is life in professional sports. The ups, the downs, the ebbs, the flows. The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Beautifully put.
Thank you. All right, I'm Mike. That's Logan. We will see you again next week. Goodbye.